Right, back live with you tonight on In Focus. Let's go back to that story then, that controversial landing of that plane from the UAE at the Bisho airport, and now some talks of even possibly the leasing of that airport to the UAE. The African Transformation Movement asking for answers. They've written to President Ramaphosa wanting an explanation as to what actually happened and what are these special exemptions that made it possible, really, facilitate this particular lending. Here to help us understand is ATM leader Vuyo Zungula, who joins us now. Good to have you, Tata. Thank you very much for your time. Does seem that there was some kind of arrangement that was made either at provincial level or maybe even at national level to say the president of the UAE is coming, the plane is too big, it can't land in any of the airports around there, and therefore this special arrangement needed to be made. The question is asked, therefore, why was the special arrangement made, and what laws were broken in making the special arrangement?
Evening, Tabo. Look, firstly, we want to remind people that public power needs to be exercised responsibly, because when public representatives, your government officials are acting, they're acting based on the power that they've been given by the people. Therefore, it cannot be that there's going to be a country with laws, with regulations as to the movement of people in and outside of the country. And then you are going to have a special arrangement that is done for a president of another country. And, the laws of our country are going to be undermined. If you look, the Premier of the Eastern Cape went to that particular country in early April or March this year. And then when he comes back and there is this big rush to make sure that the laws of our country are floated in order to make sure that the stay and the coming in of that president is smooth for his own benefit. And the actions of Mr. Mabuyane and that particular department have got nothing to do with making sure that all visitors actually respect our laws. It's a matter of bending our laws to accommodate people because they've got money. So our view as the ATM is that in light of the challenge that we face as a country, recently we got grey-listed because we do not have mechanisms to deal with money laundering, etc. Recently, there was undeclared foreign currency that came through, a port of entry, which is OR Tambo, that found itself in the farm of the president. Therefore, it cannot be that there is going to be such an incident that is happening whereby a plane carrying more than 500 passengers comes in our country. There is no, proper work that is done by Home Affairs, because Section 30.3 of the Immigration Act does state that there needs to be, a notice that is gazetted that a certain area is going to be declared, international port of entry. For this particular case, there is no gazette that could be found that declares that airport as a port of entry. Therefore, it cannot be that we are going to, act as if nothing is happening or there's nothing wrong with this entire thing, because we've got a drug problem in our country, we've got a guns problem in our country, we've got a money laundering problem in our country, and to have a plane carrying so many people just come in without the necessary checks, then it raises questions whether the checks that are necessary for each and every, visitor to come in our country, were they done? And lastly, on this issue, the fact that it is a president of a particular country, remember, it was not a state visit. Therefore, we cannot give it, give him leeway as if he was coming for a state visit. It was a private visit. He was coming on holiday with more than 500 people. And whenever presidents are coming from other countries, they do get to be, acknowledged, and, notices are there. You'll recall that even the former president of USA landed in the airport in Port Elizabeth, and he followed the necessary protocols. Why was there a need for this particular case that the necessary protocols will not be followed. That is why, as the ATM, we want answers, because we are of the strong view that there is something suspicious that is happening with this entire lending.
Yeah. So while there's no gazette that tells us that this place has now been declared an international port of entry, is there anything to suggest that immigration protocols were followed? So was the border control management there present? Did they set up something? Was it makeshift? Is there something to tell us, for example, that SARS was there and things like money coming in was declared and so on and so forth, and other things that were being brought into the country?
There is no such thing. There is secrecy of this entire lending of that particular plane. And, it raises questions as to if you are elected to be a government official or, a premier, a president, you can't want to act secret from the very same people that gave you the power to represent them. You'll recall that the premier of the Eastern Cape responded by giving a statement, a very, very vague statement, saying they want to encourage or attract investment from UAE to the Eastern Cape, but they are not being detailed as to what type of investment are they talking about, and whether their trip to the UAE as that delegation, did they discuss any deals, and what required that there must be a 20 million donation. Remember, that airport belongs to the state. It cannot be that a private citizen or even a foreigner for that matter can upgrade our infrastructure, because it is state infrastructure. You cannot just go to a state infrastructure and build it or fix it yourself, because there is a budget that is allocated for that. So it cannot be that now we are going to have leaders that are going to abuse their power, they are going to misrepresent their power, and there is no record, there is no proof, there is no any indication that the necessary protocols from your SARS, your customs, were actually done. With the amount of planes that were there, apparently there was one big plane. After that, there was other 4 or 5 planes that were also there. And if you check, there is not even an assurance that there were no arms that were carried by that plane, or there were no drugs carried by that plane, or there was no foreign currency that was carried by that plane. Therefore, it cannot be that we are going to let this go, unchecked. And the respective government leaders, they need to take responsibility and account, because we need South Africans to be law-abiding. How can it be that now the Premier or the Minister of Home Affairs are going to bend the laws to accommodate someone that is wealthy, but at the same time we expect the poor of our country to respect each and every law in our country?
So, is there reason to believe that all this could have happened without the knowledge of the president of the country? We know that money was stolen off his farm, and he was only told later, he says he didn't know there was such amount of currency. Could we be facing a similar situation right now, to say the president says all this was done in this 2 weeks, all these kind of clearances and exemptions that were required to be able to allow for this lending to happen could have happened under the nose of the president and him not being aware?
Look, we wrote to him as the president because he's the commander-in-chief of the defense. The defense of our country has got a mandate of protecting the territorial integrity of our country. We also wrote to the different ministers because some of the allegations or some of the things that happen, they fall under the mandate of those respective departments. So what we want, whether it is the president or the Minister of Home Affairs or the Minister of Defense, but there must be accountability and there must be transparency, in the sense that South Africans must know that what really transpired, what was brought by those planes that came in, and what value did that president bring towards South Africans? Because it is alleged that he came with more than 500 people, meaning your entertainers, the people that are cooking for him and everything. Now, meaning in this particular lending, there's no value that has been derived by the people of South Africa. There's no jobs. So how can it be that people are going to believe that there are investment opportunities that are coming? Whereas on this particular lending now, there's no real value that that was received by South Africans. So what we want is accountability. Whether the president knows or does not know, for us, what is important is that the premier, because clearly he's is very aware, because he went to UAE, and we want the president to advise whether there was a request from the premier of the Eastern Cape on whether he's going to UAE, and did he get the necessary approval, and what was the reason for the premier of the Eastern Cape to go to that particular country, what deals might have been struck with that particular country for the Eastern Cape. So that is what we want, transparency, and they can't hide behind secrecy, because they are not elected to have secrets from the very same people that elected them to power.
Do you believe and maybe suspect there's flouting of the laws of the country in the exercise of executive power here? And is it something that, again, you will be forwarding to the public protector to investigate?
Yeah, we're going to ask the acting public protector to investigate, because it is our strong suspicion that there is something that is off in this particular landing. It cannot be that a president goes on holiday in South Africa and there's nothing that is spoken about. There's no transparency. And when we are scratching the surface, for example, the issue of the Gazette in terms of declaring a particular point as a international port of entry, that has not been done. We searched the Home Affairs website, is not there. We searched the Government Gazette, it is not there. Therefore, our strong suspicion is that there is something that has happened, particularly because there is there's this 20 million that is spoken about that was handed over to the Eastern Cape government to actually refurbish that runway. Now the question would be, were the proper protocols followed when it comes to receiving that money? Was it declared to Treasury? Did it go via Treasury, or it went via other means? Now, the refurbishment of that particular runway, was the tendering done in a proper manner? And why is it that when wealthy people from other countries are coming and they want services, these government entities are so quick in terms of making the infrastructure to be fine, and they fix the runway, they do all of these things. However, Eastern Cape, we still have children having to cross rivers for them to go to school. So there's no urgency in terms of fixing the problems of the people of the Eastern Cape, but there's so much urgency when it comes to making things to be smooth for a president of another country. We've got nothing against other presidents from other countries, but we've got something for our country and the respect for the rule of law, and for the government ministers and the premiers to actually act in the best interest of the people, not run around when, presidents from other countries are coming here, but they are so slow, they are careless, or they do not even care when people are dying in Eastern Cape because of the lack of infrastructure and because of the lack of, employment opportunities. So we've got a problem in that particular attitude that is having a government ministers, and premiers act out of their way and rush to make life to be so much easier for people coming from outside of our country, but they do not do that for our very own citizens who depend on them to represent them.
Appreciate your time, President of ATM, Vuyo Zungula. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.